Okay, this set of notes is the beginning of our ecology unit. So this starts off chapter 3, which is just titled the biosphere. So we're looking at the largest scale of studying of ecology. We're going to skip over this slide. It doesn't work for video notes. And starting with our section slide. So section 3.1 covers introduction to global systems, including why is ecology important, the methods used to study ecology, the differences between biotic and abiotic factors, and to understand global systems. So to start off with some definitions of ecology. So the simplest definition of ecology is that it is the study of interactions among organisms and the environment. The importance about this is that ecology is really studying biotic and abiotic factors. So we're looking for relationships between living and non-living parts of the world. When we study ecology, as ecologists do, we can study it at different levels of ecological organization. So the simplest level would be to start at the species level or even the individual organism level. And by definition, a species is just a group of similar organisms that can breed and produce fertile offspring. This is our simplified definition. There's exceptions to all of this, so you could get into the side conversation about hybrids and things like that. But in general, species are organisms that interbreed. And they're all one type of organism. If you look at all of the individuals of that one type in one area at one time, you would be studying the population. So we went from one of these animals, which I have to admit, I don't know what it is. I think it's some kind of antelope type animal, and study all of those organisms, that one type, in that area. We would be studying the population. From population, we could study then the community, and the community is all of the different populations that live together in a defined area. So all of the biotic factors. So in this case, we'd be studying that antelope type animal. We'd also be studying the zebra. We might be studying the grass. We could be studying the soil bacteria. We could be studying the birds that come into this area. But any of those biotic factors and how they interact with one another, that would be studying at the community level of ecological organization. Okay? If we want to go even bigger than that, we can go from community to ecosystem level. At this point, we're adding in the abiotic factors. So all the organisms that live together in a place along with their physical environment. So we're including the non-living factors. So the water, the soil quality, the soil texture, the oxygen levels, the levels of any other type of nutrient, the amount of sunlight in the area, all of these would be part of the ecosystem. And you can study then how those factors impact the community and the living organism. At that level, we're talking about the ecosystem. From ecosystem, we can study the biome level, and biomes are just a group of ecosystems that share similar climates and typical organisms. So for example, the tropical rainforests are spread throughout the world, and they often have similar characteristics. So we look for things like the tree canopy and the fact that different organisms live within the canopy versus on the ground, and that is a defining characteristic of the tropical rainforest biomes. And so we're just looking at the widespread distribution of these ecosystems. From biome, we can study the final largest level to study life and ecology would be the biosphere, and looking at the entire Earth and any place on it where living things can survive. And so how do those living things impact as one giant system would be at the biosphere level. So maybe you're talking about the hole in the ozone and how that's impacting living organisms and things like that. So just to review, it goes from organism to population to community, all the living things, to ecosystem, add in the abiotic factors. This particular diagram kind of skips over biomes and goes straight then to biosphere as the largest level of ecological organization. So you should make sure that you understand what each of these terms means, define them, be able to pick out examples of them, and then understand maybe what types of questions an ecologist could ask at each of these levels. Our next objective in this section is to discuss ways of studying ecology, ways of gathering ecological data. So one common way is observation. So go out and observe the interactions between organisms in a community, or the interactions among a population, and just generally observe using your five senses. Next would be experimentation. So that's what we're seeing in this picture here, where we see that they've set up a particular experimental apparatus and they're collecting very specific data. They have things they're measuring throughout the entire thing. They're controlling one of these plots of land by putting the cage over it, and they've set up an experimentation to test and collect ecological data. And finally, a common method used is modeling. So usually this is computer modeling, where you're using a bunch of large data sets to kind of use computer equations then to make predictions about the ecosystem or the community or things like that. Maybe you're looking at population growth, or you're looking at modeling how changes in climate pattern are going to affect a particular biome, things like that. But that often uses computers because you just have either large systems that you can't otherwise test all of the factors in it, or maybe it's just too large or too small to directly observe.
I'm not sure I understand.
And my watch is talking to us. Finally, just to review again, biotic, abiotic factors, which term goes in which box, which in the yellow box, we're focusing on the living things. In the blue box, we're focusing on the non-living things. And so yellow should be biotic, blue should be abiotic factors. And again, these two factors interact together in what we call the environment. So if we're studying the environment, we're studying both the biotic and abiotic factors. Okay. And finally, to wrap up, we want to talk about the 4 global systems that are constantly interacting on Earth. So those 4 systems are the atmosphere, so looking at the gaseous component surrounding the Earth. We're looking at the biosphere, which we've already discussed as all the parts of the Earth that can support life and that life itself. We're looking at the hydrosphere, so hydro is water, so all of the cycling of water throughout the Earth. And finally, the geosphere, so we're looking at the Earth itself and the rocks and the minerals and the nutrients within those, and studying those. And the key thing here is they're all 4 global systems that are then interacting as one giant system. And if one of them is changing, then we're going to see overall global change, and we'll see change in the other systems as well. So we'll come back and kind of study some of our ecological questions from the global standpoint later on. But that is the end of this section. So go back, make sure you're reviewing. There's a lot of vocabulary in this section, so make sure you're comfortable with all of those terms.